Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is life coach and LOA teacher Joel Elston.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. Joel, I don't think we can fail today.
Well, we're going to try. I mean, we're going to give our best shot.
Well, the reason I say that is that's the topic today. So even if we're talking about failure, then we haven't failed because that was the topic.
Exactly. And as you know, that's one of my favorite sort of concepts about failure. I had to adjust my perspective of failure years ago, and it changed everything for me.
Yeah. Well, it's a perspective thing. And as such, as a perspective thing, it's something that I don't know. I suspect a lot of people get this one relatively early in life compared to other concepts. I know I got it fairly early in life, although as I look at the broader society today, I'm not so sure. So maybe I'm kind of overestimating that a little bit. But,
right.
But nevertheless, no, I think a lot of people get that at a fairly early age. The challenge, I think, is learning to stick to it, to believe that it really is true. Because you can get the concept, right? The concept is fairly easy. But then when you actually come face to face with failures or what seem to be failures, that's when we kind of get challenged.
One of the things that a lot of young people, and I experienced this years ago when I was young, the concept of the fear of failing in front of other people, the fear of seeing you struggle, the idea that, that effort, you didn't want to, failure is not an option is a flawed concept that a lot of people used to talk about. If failure is not an option, then neither is success. Failure is anything that I ever have achieved was after great epic failures. In fact, I failed gigantically in a lot of ways, and learned to accept that, learn to understand it. My gym my workouts and stuff were a great teacher of that. And the point of every workout is to work to failure. So I don't grow without failure. Failure, it applies to all aspects of my life. I want to work hard and fail. I want to test the system, what works, what doesn't work. And once I understood that, failure is really the greatest growth mechanism I ever encountered. Failure allows me to know I work there. A gymnast I work with, I've used an example with her. She's, I don't know, probably 16 now, but she was potentially at one point going to the Olympics, and she has one of the greatest perspectives of failure I ever heard. She said, to be a gymnast at my level, I fail 99.9% of the time.
Wow.
Before I get it right. Failure is the only option until you get it perfect. At that level, it's perfect. That's you don't get a lot of non-perfect things when you get to that level of competition. So if I didn't appreciate failure, I would not be able to be a competitive gymnast, is her mindset. And she was great at it. She just got up, where's the sticking point, and keeps going until she gets it. So failure instructs. Failure is a growth tool that a lot of people think you're supposed to avoid. And I figured out the pathway to my success, embracing failure as a tool of growth.
You used a word there that I want to touch upon because I think it's a really important one, and it's going to be somewhat controversial too. Because you talked about how she aimed 99.9% of the time she failed because she was trying to seek that point that at the level that she was working at, you really have to reach for perfection.
Yes,
that's the word that I want to talk about for a moment is perfection, because that's one of those really slippery concepts. I mean, we can aim for perfection all we want and basically end up screwing ourselves in the process.
Most of my work that I do with people is focused on perfection is the enemy of good. Perfection keeps you from being good or proficient. Perfection, you can get stuck on it and it debilitates. There are some situations, and being an Olympic gymnast is the definition is perfection. The average local gymnast on a high school team or something, good is fantastic. That's amazing. But to go compete in the Olympics against the best in the world, it is perfection. And that's just, there are going to be cases of that. And we're not talking about the average person. So this is just one area of where perfection is the goal. Perfection is necessary. You watch Simone Biles do her routine, And I watch that, and in my mind, it just can't be done any better. And even she loses a half a point now and then. It's amazing to me.
Well, let me propose an idea to you. Instead of aiming at perfection, what if we're aiming for joy or for beauty or for wonderful creation?
Well, I mean, that would be, again, that would be for the average everyday what we're after. But when you're going to be talking, I can't imagine a gym just going, I'm going to really work on beauty today.
Well, understand how I'm using the word beauty here. I'm talking about the beauty of the routine, the beauty of what they're doing.
I know I'm talking about this girl's mindset. That's how she grew up with. And I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I get you. Yeah, I'm just trying to zero in on it.
Yeah. She is going to. They are taught from such a young age that this perfection is the point in this, and it is. And nobody ever obtains it. I think one or two people have obtained it by definition over the years, but for the most part, it isn't really perfection. There's some people that you go in and you are looking for the beauty of it or the love of the sport, and there's a lot of sports you can do that with. But when you're looking at, I look at every individual situation based on every individual person. I also wouldn't want to be this young lady. I mean, the stress on her life is outrageous, and it's not a quality. I'm not a good concept for the average person, but when you understand that's how they're programmed, and it is so. I work with a lot of NFL players, and they don't. There's really no way to be perfect in the NFL. You got to be great or good or whatever, but perfect is just something. Baseball. I kid you about baseball, but baseball, if you hit the ball, 1 out of 3 times for your entire career, you're going to the Hall of Fame.
You're a Hall of Famer, yeah, right.
Yeah, and so that's far from perfection. So there's so there's a lot of it that you do, but for me, the bigger idea for me with failure, and I never have really had a problem operating with perfection, just because I've never considered myself perfect. Or the ability to be perfect, really, to be honest with you. I know my skill set is resilience, hard work, and getting really good at something. I'm really good at my career. I'm really good at the stuff I do. I don't know. I don't know. I also like to try things that don't work. I like to try different concepts. Perfection can prevent you, as we've talked about many times, from really just enjoying things sometimes, because if you're constantly stuck on perfection, you're just stuck, and that doesn't work. But the definition of failure is, your fear of failure, a person's fear of failure, I don't want to fail, is often accompanied or is mistaken for a fear of success sometimes too. Fear of success brings responsibility. So people almost use the excuse of failing, not being, I'm fear of failing, but they're also equally, if not more so, fear of success, because that comes with a whole lot of stuff.
There was a movie, an Academy Award winning movie from the early 1980s, and I can't remember the name of it. I'm sure some listeners probably going to come up with it here, or you may even think of it while I'm talking here. It's one we've all heard of, we've all seen. I just can't remember the name of it. But it's the story of a very early Olympics, and particularly the runners in the Olympics, and how
Chariots of Fire.
Chariots of Fire, that's the one. Yes. The thing that stands out to me about that movie is that the one who wins the gold medal in the race is the one who runs with the greatest amount of joy. That's where I brought the joy factor.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess one could say that if you win the gold medal, you reach a level of perfection. But for me, the perfection was in the joy. It wasn't the perfection. It was he was just running with just absolute abandon.
Yeah. Yeah. And that applies to life as well. Whatever you're going to do it with joy.
Yeah.
And it certainly is. But when you hear the word failure, there's certainly, for most people, a negative connotation to that. And I have reprogrammed failing or failure to be a very positive thing in my mind. So when I think of failure, I think of growth. I don't think of negative. I think of growth.
So that's another important concept to bring in here. The idea that when we talk about failure or success, we so often have negative or positive emotions associated with negativity, with failure or success. And that's a key. That's really highly key. That's really that's the source of the whole issue, I think.
Absolutely. Yes, I agree with you.
Right. Because when we're so focused on well, is it the right thing? Is it the wrong thing? Is it really good? Is it really bad? That's when we crush ourselves. I mean, you could throw perfection out the window at that point.
Oh
You're
yeah.
lucky if you can even reach average,
Yes. Yeah.
just because of that mindset.
Yeah. That when you understand how the brain learns, neuroplasticity is most increased after failing.
Mm,
I don't know if we've ever discussed that on the show, but
just a
there's
few
a
times, yeah.
yeah, there's the brain learns, failure instructs the brain, and it's more open to learn after failure. That feeling of failing opens the brain to say, I don't want to fail again, so let's do it better.
Mm,
And that's a really good tool to understand. The idea that we're going to learn from it, move on, or we're going to quit and give up. The reward is in failing is to learn from it, understand it, be able to get good at it. When you watch somebody, um, I'll always love it when I see a young person come in the gym, 13 or 14 years old, never touched a weight in their life, and they're so awkward on the bench press, or they're so
sure.
awkward on the thing, and they're looking around at all the big guys, all the strong guys, and they're like,
Right.
I'm embarrassed, and I always make it a point to go over to explain to them every single person in the gym that you're looking at, gigantic guys, strong guys, are set right where you're sitting. We all wobbled when we did our first bench press. We all, we were felt weird because we're only doing the bar and everybody else is doing a lot of weight. But I explained that because that's how you're going to learn. You're going to learn it through that. The body's
Mhm.
adapting, and when you first time you touch a bar that's very unstable because you never had to stabilize that, and that only takes a few reps before you can able to stay. The brain works quickly that way.
Mm,
So there's relieving yourself of the fear, not just the fear of failure, the fear of people seeing you fail
yeah.
is one of the things that drive. I know a lot of people that don't try because they don't want to appear to be, oh well, I don't want people to see me as a failure, so I'm better off not trying. The perspective, or somebody that I don't want anybody to know I'm struggling.
Mm,
And I embrace, the struggle. I embrace it. The struggle saved my life. Struggle made me strong. I had to reframe those words because they were different when I was younger, and they actually were not growth mechanisms for me. They were just negative and avoided.
I,
Versus being able to reprogram myself to expect I am a product of failure. I'm a product of struggle, and I say that with complete confidence and not in any way negative. I broke through it.
I think a key portion of this part of the conversation is how do we feel about what we're experiencing?
Yes,
I mean, that's really what you're describing. You're describing
absolutely.
somebody who is concerned about what somebody else is thinking, concerned about how they look, all that kind of thing, which we've all been through. We all know what that's like. Uh, but at the end of the day, it's literally giving our power away by believing that it doesn't matter so much what we think or what we feel inside.
Right.
And
Completely.
that includes all the all the shakiness, all the scaredness, all that, and which it's all totally legitimate feeling to have. But by the same token, there's also the possibility, and this is where I think it gets really interesting. There's also the possibility that we can find a different way of thinking and feeling about it. That literally that's open to us as an option. Because
Absolutely.
right when we're dealing with that kind of stuff, that's probably the last thing that occurs to us.
Well, I think, as you know, I believe every single thing in life is perspective based. Everything has a perspective that you can reframe and adjust, and that's not just limited to our conversation today, but reframing and perspective adjustment allows the body can adapt, the mind can adapt, and look at things from a different angle, and that's really important.
Yep. No doubt about that. And don't mind me. I'm playing. Somebody left a comment up, and I wasn't really interested in the comment. I ended up throwing it up on screen by accident, but ignore me on that
Yeah, no problem. So, you have we, not you, we as human beings have, you're programmed with certain things. And, I had a conversation with Justin's doctor earlier today. Justin was at the doctor just for a checkup, and him and I are friends, and we talked, and, he was talking about this particular set of young people that went through COVID and the anxiety and all the other stuff, that they're having symptoms of the social problems that took place during COVID. He sees
Mm,
that really across the board. all the kids, the junior high and elementary kids weren't that much affected, but junior high and high school kids were definitely affected.
Oh yeah.
And it's affecting how they look at things. There's the perspective, the whole COVID thing. This is not political. Somebody will probably try to make it that way, but
well, these days, I mean, we're in a cycle right now where everything's going to be political. So
exactly.
good luck avoiding it,
yeah. So, but regardless of whatever happened, the fear that was espoused or spoken about during COVID was so damaging. The way the newspaper reported.
Oh yeah.
Today we had 100,000 people die from COVID, and I don't remember that exact number that day, but something like that. Failing to mention 600,000 people completely had recovered by that point.
Yeah, and that was key. I remember what we talked about that too.
Yes, and so the fear suggested that things are and COVID was serious. There's no debate about that. I'm not trying to get on any of that concept, but the idea that the vast majority of people during COVID were healthy and we're going to survive it and move on. It was just it didn't mean that we don't need to take it seriously, but the idea that we were trying so desperately to scare everybody into it to a certain way of you have to do all this, and you have to do all that. It really created fear, and it bypassed like the normal processes within families. I mean, shutting down the schools and shutting everything down and shutting that, the signal to the average kid at the time was, this is catastrophic. And families were responding that way. People with first week of the shutdown, nobody knew what to do.
Yeah.
And so
we were making up as we went along, really.
Yeah. And so again, I'm not griping and moaning about all that. I'm just saying that, with all of this, the experiences we have and that growth mindset of we're going to overcome this, we're going to do this, and failure is not an option is a negative thing versus embracing the struggle and all those counterintuitive or seeming opposite reactions to things are all meaningless in the sense that when you realize that we are here for our mission, we have whatever your purpose and whatever your life is. The only way that I have found success is through trying it, working through it, failing, adjusting, not giving up, keep going. I screwed up far more than the average person would in my 20s. That's documented. I have legal documents to prove that. So, and the idea that at 33 I was released from jail and I'm a convicted felon and I had nothing at that point. I failed gigantically there. And what were my odds of coming back from that? That's, I was told nobody comes back from that.
Yeah. Well, that was, and is to this day, that was the general societal belief. You go through that, you're basically done. Your life is a wash up.
Yeah.
Which you completely disproved. With your own life.
In fact, I just use that as fuel. Like, well, somebody's about to do it. So
absolutely.
And that's how I did. And again, I'm not saying there weren't moments of down and, self-pity and all the other stuff early, but I was determined to, give it my best shot. And it worked. And I embraced the concept that we're talking about. So a lot of it is, just perspective, as we're saying. Perspective dictates a lot, and how you're taking these things, but failing and teaching our kids to fail. I explain, I've always spoken to my kids about failing and the benefit. You're never a failure if you don't quit. Failing only becomes a problem when you quit. The process of failing is instructive. The act of being a failure is when you just give up and it's over. That's when it gets really damaging.
Yeah, that now we're zeroing in on what the hardcore stuff is.
Yes.
It reminds me of the conversations that I've had with you and with other co-hosts and so forth about the religious side, because when you look at what religions teach, religions are very often focused on what evil is and what failure is and what what sin is. Sin, that's a big one right there, right?
Yeah.
And it's an ironic thing because the way, especially in Christian churches, the way sin is promoted and pushed, it's a horrible thing. It's a terrible thing. You want to avoid at all costs. when you look at the origins of the word, you miss the mark. And like, oh, okay. So we're setting a pretty high standard here. Basically, you can never miss the mark. That's like a good luck with that one.
Yeah. That's rough. And I won't make any commentary about the church or any of that right now. So, but I agree with you. So,
and my whole reason for bringing up the church is just that is an example of how we take a concept and, to use a word you and I often have used in the past, we awfulize it. We make it worse than it has to be.
Yes.
So when we're talking about failure, for many people, failure becomes a highly negatively charged emotional state, when in fact it's just you missed.
Yeah,
and when you miss, you pick it up and you do it again. It's not a big deal unless you make a big deal out of it.
Yeah, I have a shirt that one of my workout shirts is I failed epically today. And yeah, I did. It worked out perfectly for me.
I know that for myself, one of the most important things that I've learned to do is to just stop thinking about things as being failures.
Yes.
Just take my mind off of it, because for me, and this isn't going to be true for everybody. Obviously, apparently it wasn't true for you at all. But for me, it was too emotionally charged to even bring failure into the conversation. So because every time I did, all I ended up doing was just burying myself. So I said, well, I'm going to take that charge out of the conversation entirely.
And there's a couple. Yeah, you can take it out of the conversation, or you can really reframe the definition. But either way, you're changing it.
You're changing it. Yes.
Yeah, and that's it. And I just, I like shocking statements. So I
know you do.
Yeah, I really do. So I like to keep the word, but now I have a definition of the word that's different than what most people see, and that's my reality. Failure instructs. It's one of my daily mindsets of in fact, when I do something, I find one of the most effective ways to do it is like try it, see where I failed, and then fix it.
Yeah.
And that doesn't apply to every situation, but I like to use that catalyst to say, I'm not scared of it, and certainly something that I have failed multiple times in my life, and at a great scale, obviously, and a huge amount of failure, but it's that reframing that allowed me to use it as a strengthening process, and again, everybody, this doesn't work for everybody, and a lot of people have a hard time reframing the words or changing the definitions they believe in the word, and that's okay. But like you're saying, you can avoid it. You don't have to do it. You can just not address it, and just you're trying, or whatever definition you have going on. But either way, making it where you're understanding that all of life is amazing. We're here. We're not here to be miserable and whiny, and so when you think failure is a punishment, you're not understanding how that next level is obtained. The most successful people in the world fail miserably, and one thing that I do appreciate, and I don't agree with all the stuff of sort of this new, the tech giants and all that, but they have instilled a new fail frequently, fail often, and learn from it.
Oh yeah.
That they have brought that to the table. Elon Musk, he launched rockets saying, "Let me be clear, they're going to crash."
And we want them to crash often.
yeah. He said we were going to crash a bunch of them, and we're going to each time.
By the way, they make great reels. I mean, if you ever watched one of the Elon Musk reels of all the rockets that they crashed, they're like, it's like watching a cartoon or something. It's fabulous.
Well, in fact, he had a really, I forget which one, but there was one when he was getting one of the rockets going. He went and he said, "There is a 0% chance this thing doesn't blow up at the peak. It's 0." Well, everybody watched it. It blew up exactly at the moment he said it would blow up. And the interesting thing is his stock, the market responded by going up.
Yeah.
He knows what he's doing. He had to test where it was at. And the second one got launched. He said, "This is going to do better. It'll fail here," and it basically did. And he knew what he was doing. And again, I'm not promoting Elon Musk. I'm just simply saying the concept.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's no such thing as pure black and white. There are plenty of things about Elon Musk I don't like.
Right,
but
of course.
But that's one of the things I do like. I mean, I think he's nailed that particular point perfectly. and he may utter some other stuff that I just kind of shake my head and say,
Yeah,
really, what
yeah, of
planet are
course.
you born on? But not that one.
No,
That one
and
he's got perfect. He's got it's I mean, there's the word perfect, right? But that's what's perfect.
well, there's this boxing coach that was teaching one of my clients how to box, and the young man had a tendency to keep his right hand down,
Mm.
and so probably 15 times in a row he would take his hand gently and raise his right hand up and tell him to keep it there, and then every time after the guy he would throw a jab, he would keep lowering it. So 15 times he did that. On the 16th time he just knocks the shit out of the kid.
Mm.
I mean, not
Yeah.
damaging. And he goes, okay, 15 times you didn't do it. Now, the kid never lowered his elbow again.
I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah. And so I thought that was pretty cool. It was just it was that concept. But
sometimes I mean, I call those the 2x4 moments.
Yeah.
We set ourselves up for them so frequently. It's really fascinating to watch somebody. You can just tell when they're doing it.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm sure you see it all the time in your practice.
Oh yeah.
But I just see it among the average population. I'll see somebody repeating the same behavior over and over again, getting the wrong result, and I'm saying to myself, there's a 2x4 moment coming, and it's going to be coming pretty quick.
Yeah, and the when you I know this engineer, he really his concepts to when he goes into repair whatever systems, he's an electrical engineer, but he does other engineering as well. And he says the best way to figure out where the problem is stress the system. Just stress the system.
Yeah.
The system will reveal where the weakness is. So you want to put as much load on the system as you can, and if it blows up at that point, excellent. Now we know where the problem is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so he brings that mindset of let's make it fail, then we know where to put our pressure instead of trying to figure out where it's failing. And before you do it, it takes forever to do it that way. He said, let's see where the system fails. And that's going to be
fail.
Yeah.
Yeah. The amazing thing is when you can actually make it and you can't fail it.
Yeah.
When that finally happens, you say, what am I overlooking?
Exactly. So, but it's like with anything else. I love this topic, and I'm not trying to be, but it's one of my favorite concepts. I really believe in it. It helps a lot of my clients when you can, just adjust your perspective of failure, because my programming, when I grew up and I'm not griping about my childhood, but I had a childhood where no one in my family ever used the words "I'm wrong." It wasn't a possibility. They would argue points about what you said and this person said, and even when they knew they were wrong, they still and I find that fascinating that learning to admit I'm wrong, I failed, I got it wrong, or whatever. There's a power in that I was robbed of as a child, because it just you wake up one day and it's not that big of a deal. You're wrong. Of course I was wrong. I was 7. I was wrong. Yes.
Well, you don't have to be 7. I actually had an experience today with a doctor. I went to a naturopathic physician. I've been dealing. I think the audience knows I've been dealing with chronic headaches, and she's been trying to help me through with various nutritional approaches. And at one point, we were talking about recommended nutrient values on RDA, that kind of thing. And she was making the point, quite valid, I think, that RDA is really, it isn't so much a recommended daily allowance. It's a bare minimum. You don't want to go below that.
Right.
You don't have enough nutrition if you go below that.
Right.
And I won't go into the wherefores and all that about how the whole thing was playing out. But at one point I said, okay, I agree with that, but what's the better option? I mean, if it's not RDA, what do we measure against? And she said something you don't get to hear from a doctor very often. She says, you know what? I don't know. I thought, whoa.
Yeah.
Okay. A doctor admitting she doesn't know something, and something pretty important too.
Yeah.
I was like, holy cow. I was impressed by that.
Yeah. I love it when that happens. And so much of medicine is that it's, I don't know if we've ever discussed, I think you and I did on one show, the recommended maximum heart rate per age.
Yes, right. I remember we did do that one. Yes.
Yeah. So this is funny to me because it helps sort of understand that. So this exercise guy, he's really good in exercise, right? Probably had a PhD or whatever. years ago came up with an example of, for his clients, he was very clear. He said, I don't know exactly, but this seems to be something that I created. So your maximum heart rate during exercise, you take 220, you minus your age, and that is the absolute max heart rate you can have. Then if like most exercise, you want to go 80% max heart rate. Then you times that by 80%.
Mm-hmm.
So, and if you look up medical journals, if you look up, everybody will have that formula.
Wow.
That's how you determine it. The guy's like, oh my goodness, no, I made up the 220. It's not real.
It's invented.
It's a random number that we're not. There's entire books written on this made up number that he just said, oh my gosh, I'm embarrassed that my name's attached to this. He said, I was very clear. It was just an experiment that I was working on. It's one of the ones that got out. He said, I don't use that in my own stuff anymore. And yet it's become sort of science.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That you just touched on something really important there, I believe, which is so much of what gets passed off as science isn't necessarily science.
Right.
You get the right person saying something, and all of a sudden it gets accepted as science without reservation, without checking it, without establishing that really is the fact. Just simply, well, the authority said it; it must be true. And it's astonishing how often that happens.
Oh, I mean, some of the things we accept as facts. One of the things when you go see your doctor, they will weigh you. They'll take your height and they'll tell you your BMI, body mass index.
Yeah. Yes.
So what it is it's not taking in account body fat or muscle. It's just taking mass, weight.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I haven't been to the doctor in years where I'm not literally morbidly obese. That's where I am, because I'm 5'11". I'm right now about 225. I'm a power lifter. I carry very little body fat, but yet, Arnold Schwarzenegger in his prime, almost 2% body fat, one of the best physiques in the history of the world, was considered obese by the body mass index. It's it's an absurd number that becomes science, and it doesn't make any sense. It's when somebody's running, in fact, 5% body fat's too little, but healthy 15% body fat is whatever your weight is, 15% body fat, you're healthy. You're really healthy. That's it, because you're carrying so much muscle mass.
In fact, when I first heard of the idea of the BMI, the body mass index, the first thought that went through my mind was, who came up with this thing? Because it didn't make it, even on the face of it, it literally didn't make any sense to me.
No, it's crazy. Yeah. And that's the thing. We have belief systems that really like our food pyramid.
Oh, yeah.
The government, it's almost like you need to turn that upside down. They have it actually totally reversed. It's just, it's like, where do they come up with this? It's so random.
And we do know some of the histories.
Yes.
Like, for instance, we know a lot of what was originally part of the food pyramid and the food groupings and so forth was actually created by a government bureaucrat who had to fill out a report and was told to fill out a report. So he filled out a report. It just invented, and it became the law of the land.
Well, there are still a lot of people that believe that eggs are a dangerous food because of their cholesterol.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's unless you have an impairment. I'm always like to leave, I'm not saying this is a blanket for everybody. Sometimes eggs have too much protein for people that have kidney issues, so that could be a problem. So I'm not saying everybody can go eat all the eggs they want, but eggs are literally one of the healthiest foods available to us. The nutrients, the fat in eggs is the exact fat that your brain needs to restore itself and maintain. It actually helps keep the blood from clotting with the buildup and stuff. Eggs are incredibly nutrient dense. There is no limit on eggs that you're eating as long as you're healthy, and there could be situations for any food, but or you're not allergic. But eggs are incredibly healthy. But yet, for the average person, that wow, they're dangerous because your cholesterol is going to go up. No, it's not. Mine went down when I started eating more eggs. There's also, remember when margarine became the healthy alternative to butter?
Oh my God, that stuff was revolting. Ugh.
Yeah, it's like, oh, this is much healthier. Are you kidding me? Butter's super healthy. It's just
Yeah.
it. But we have these belief systems that come along in medicine that they become fact just because they're repeated so much, and it's not true. It's just brown rice. The average person, brown rice is far superior than white rice.
It's certainly what the prevailing belief is.
It's slightly different, very tiny, doesn't really
Yeah.
matter. Some people argue white rice is healthier because brown rice is harder to digest and has an enzyme in it that could upset your stomach. White rice is quicker. It does have a tiny bit higher glycemic index, but it digests so fast. It's probably, there's people that, again, it's just taking some of the Asian cultures, they eat fish and huge amounts of rice.
Oh yeah, massive amounts.
And they're walking around leaner than anything we got going on over here.
Yeah, exactly.
So again, but that's when science, quote unquote, we as people, humans, sort of tend to take things for a grain of salt, with a grain of salt, and believe it. Like, oh well, like the whole concept of antidepressants, and on the label on antidepressants, I'm not being controversial. It literally says, Walt, we do not know how this works. It does. Here's what we think, but we have no proof of that.
Nice. It's nice to know there's a little bit of honesty going on.
That's but it's like, oh, okay. So wait a minute. Can we circle back to we don't know, but we
don't
think?
know.
You're giving somebody something that messes with brain chemicals, and you're just sort of, oh, let's cross our fingers. This might work this way.
Well, you mentioned eggs, and it's actually very poignant because I even announced it here on the show. I went through some food sensitivity testing.
Sure.
And eggs came up on fairly high, medium to high on my my list.
Yes.
So I've been actually eliminating, not because of cholesterol, although my ND is also really sensitive to the whole idea of eggs with cholesterol, but that wasn't really the issue with me. The issue was simply a food sensitivity that we were trying to eliminate to see if it would alleviate headache.
Right.
And another thing that was really big on her list with me was I like to drink milk, and she wanted me to stop milk entirely. Well, I got rid of the eggs and I stopped the milk entirely. And that was in August. By September, I had declined. I was worse. My headaches were worse. They were more pronounced. I was less productive during the day. I was having to sleep longer, just trying to deal with all this stuff. So I brought the milk back in, and I also made a few other changes too. And the headaches improved. They didn't get great yet, but they got back to the level they were at before. So they improved. And so I said to myself, well, yeah, so much for the theory about milk, because I'm getting exactly the opposite result from what she was suggesting. And today I met with her, and I mentioned how she admitted there was something that she didn't know about. Well, one of the other things that came out of the conversation was she agreed, I'm not really showing actual real world signs of egg sensitivity. She did recommend that I challenge myself. That was the way she described it, that I challenge my body by, if I want to find out whether I really can handle eggs, for like one day, give myself 3 helpings of eggs or something like that, and see how I tolerate it. And if I tolerate it okay, then I would not necessarily go back to 3 helpings a day of eggs, but simply I can start incorporating it back into my diet. So I'm going to start doing that. I'm actually pretty sure it's going to be okay, because I used to have eggs every day.
Yeah,
it's not like this is a new thing for me.
But in the body again, the human body is amazing, and the individual response for everybody. I'm never going to say blanket across the board. This applies to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So food sensitivities are real. Also, sure. I know very well that some people will test positive for food sensitivities, but really have no real tangible reaction from some of the sensitivities.
Mm-hmm. So and she acknowledged that, by the way. Yeah. The doctor acknowledged that today.
So I see that with the food. So a lot of it, I'm more inclined. Did this basically come from nature? Is it food? Is it real food? Then generally, unless you have food sensitivities or other conditions, you can pretty much eat it. You don't want allergies or any of the other stuff, but you want to be able to, like the idea that we talk about gluten problems for a lot of people now. The wheat and grains we use today don't remotely resemble the wheat and grains we use way back in the day.
Yeah, very different.
Very different. So it's not the same. Bread's been around for years, but industrially, commercially made bread and gigantic things, all the additives to make it last longer. Bread, when you cook it at home or you have a good, there's this really good for you, really healthy, except for those carbs for me. But that's a whole nother thing. I can eat like 2 loaves of homemade bread in one sitting too, with a whole stick of butter too. I mean,
oh my goodness, yes,
yeah. It's
very
fantastic.
dangerous.
Yeah, very dangerous. So we don't do that. But my point is, a loaf of Wonder Bread has no nutrients left. It's been washed out. It's been bleached. It's white bread, and it's just basically sugary carbs with preservatives. Again, not great for you.
Something occurred to me today. My dance teacher actually brought it to my mind the last time I had a class, which was a week ago, last Tuesday. She was talking about, she has 2 boys, one named Jack, one named Daniel, which is kind of interesting, Jack, Daniel. But
Wow.
The 2 of them are typical kids in that they basically have 2 foods they like to eat: chicken McNuggets, or chicken nuggets anyway, and peanut butter.
Yep.
And that's pretty much it. And I thought about that both when she was talking about it and afterward. I realized, there is a very small nutritional profile going on there.
Yes.
I mean, if you look at that in terms of RDA or anything else, they're not. There's a whole lot of stuff they're not getting enough of.
Right.
And yet, amazingly, they continue to grow.
Yep.
How the hell does that happen?
Well, first of all, the human body is amazing.
It really is.
It can manufacture things. It can do things, and
but there are a lot of nutrients it can't manufacture in theory, according to what medical science tells us. But they're not in the McNuggets, and they're not in the peanut butter. I mean,
but the body's obviously coming up with them somehow.
Somehow, how is it doing it?
Yeah, that's one of the great mysteries. I know. When you get very narrow food choices, it can really. But I see kids with very poor diets grow great.
Yeah.
And then I try to introduce, like with my kids, they're going to lean towards certain foods, but I always try to get any supplements I provided were always natural, or like I sent you my organ pills that I take for all that stuff.
Right.
My kids have always taken those, and that has a wide variety of nutrients and B vitamins in them. So I use that as sort of a multivitamin healthy thing for them too. So I knew where they were getting it. And I also have them take a mineral complex that made sure all their minerals were met. So I sort of cheated to fill in the deficits, but all the processed food right now is just, I'm amazed that the bodies can figure out how to grow with all that. They're incredibly resilient, so they're figuring out some way to do it. But it always has baffled me as well.
It lends, though, to the overall conversation we're having, because the original conversation is about failure and being defeated by failure, or changing our mindset about failure, or whatever. And if we're looking at the human body, which is what we're doing right now, the human body clearly has to deal with failure every time that those kids eat just the nuggets and the peanut butter, because that's a form of failure. They're failing to fill in all the nutritional needs, and yet it doesn't seem to be a problem, because even nature just kind of rewrites the whole formula. It's not a failure, it's not a defeat, it's just a different way of doing something. We're going to find a way around it.
And why not anything I would recommend? Also, peanut butter is nutrient dense. It's also calorie dense and sugar dense, but it is nutrient dense. Yeah. And has a lot of stuff. A lot of the crazy drinks they drink have added, a few vitamins in there. Your cereal in the morning often is fortified with, vitamins. These aren't great sources, but they do. Nature has, humans have sort of figured out how to boost some of that stuff, and the body says, while I don't like the source, I'll figure out how to use it.
That's part of it, I think. Part of it, though, I think is almost inexplicable. I agree. I think we were kind of onto something when we were saying, there's a lot of stuff that in theory the body can't reproduce, and yet somehow it's either able to reproduce it or to draw it from the ether. I don't know, who knows where it's getting it from the ether bunny. But
I like that.
But it's like, how the hell is the body doing that? And yet it's doing it.
It
and yet
doesn't.
it's doing it. And
It's
to
amazing.
me, not only is that amazing, I think it's instructive.
It is.
Because what the body is really telling us is, I don't see this as a failure. I don't see this as a defeat. I just see this as a new opportunity, a new way to figure out how to be healthy.
Well, way back in the old days, the carnivore, the hunters would go 2 weeks without eating. They would kill a
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
wild animal and they would feast, and they would eat the liver, which is nutrient dense. They would eat
Yep.
the nutrient dense organs, and they might go another week or two without eating. And it's what happened. The body, and they thrived, they survived, they were strong, they were resilient. It's amazing. The human body is the most complicated, most amazing machine. The brain. I do a deep dive into the brain all the time and looking at it. It's just, I can't even comprehend. I all the stuff I've studied, I just cannot comprehend how the brain does what it does and manages all that it manages. It's fascinating to me. But the body is, it just takes what it needs to do and somehow figures it out.
Especially when they discovered, I think it was within the last 20, 30 years, they discovered that the brain is not the only location for neurons. They found neurons in the heart.
Stomach and heart. Yeah.
Yeah. And so basically your heart is capable of thinking. Like, what?
Yeah. Well, that's why you get the saying, I felt it in my heart, I feel it in my gut.
Yeah.
It's real. They're produced there. Everybody's always assumed your brain chemicals were produced in your brain. Your gut
Not
is
really.
the main source of those now.
Yeah.
I mean, they always have been. We just sort of discovered that. But I'm always amazed. The human body's amazing, and it has the ability to do things that make no sense, but it does. One of the things that I was always fascinated about, I mentioned this family years ago. Early in my recovery, I was working in this after-school program, and I became a mentor for a young man that was in this family of like 9 children.
Wow.
She was a single mom, 9 kids, aging from brand new to 18. And their house was a zoo. It was, she was dealing with a lot of stuff. I wouldn't sit down in the house. It was not, I wouldn't use the bathroom in the house. And after I left, I would stop at the gas station and wash my hands after being in the house. It was deplorable conditions, and the social services was involved. They were helping out. There's spoiled food in the refrigerator, flies. I mean, just, I don't want to, it isn't, I'm not making fun of the lady. She was just struggling a lot with these kids. Yeah. And the amazing thing is, the kids at the time, the one I was dealing with was 10. He had a brother who was 5, another younger brother who was 4, and those kids, and one other brother, a little older, was 12. They all had perfect attendance at school. They never got sick.
Wow.
They never got sick. Their bodies had to fight off the most, it just, just to live in those conditions, the immune system was amplified. I really believe that. That's, nobody's ever told me that doctor-wise, but perfect attendance at school, these kids were never sick. Yeah. And the conditions they grew up in, I think the body said, well, this is all we got to do.
It kind of makes me wonder. I mean, we were talking about perfection earlier. One of the things that I've thought about is we can make the argument that in many ways we abuse our bodies.
Yes.
Well, some of us really abuse our bodies, but to one degree or another, we all, even in a little way, we tend to abuse our bodies, even if it's just in the way we eat. And as of course, because I've been dealing with the headache issues and trying to resolve those, I was looking at, what does my own diet look like, and trying to understand what the nutritional profile was, because it turns out none of the doctors have any clear idea what the nutritional profile is. They can tell you what the individual nutritional profiles of certain foods are, but the overall diet, they just, that's where the whole concept of a balanced diet comes from. They don't have a better way of presenting it and examining it, so they say, well, you just want to balance everything out.
Right.
It's kind of a way of just like covering the whole thing over and saying, I don't really know, but we're just going to leave it like that.
Yeah. It's amazing what we don't know in that arena.
There's a ton.
Yeah. And another thing that I find fascinating is a tomato, for example. The nutritional density of a tomato was about 1/3 of what it was 25 years ago, because the way they plant, we're depleting the soil. They're all, so you're getting these, not, I'm not opposed to, you know, combining two strong tomatoes to make a more resilient tomato. I'm not saying that's a negative thing, but our soil is so depleted, and our farming techniques are, there, and you have to have it for the masses. I'm not critical of that. I understand how that works, but you get these tomatoes, and you cut into it, and it's like, the tomato is very healthy, but when you're getting 1/3 the nutritional density of 25 years ago, there's an effect there.
And one of the coolest things, you can actually tell that now. You can do a test to demonstrate that to yourself. You get a commercially produced tomato and you get an heirloom tomato, and you cut them both open. The difference is stark. It doesn't take a scientist to figure it out. You look at it, it's like, whoa, okay, you can just see it. It's right there in front of you.
The ultimate
And
thing
it tastes different too.
Oh, it does. I get, as you know, I'm an egg aficionado, and so I get eggs from this little store's homemade home store farm. I know the name of my chickens. I know all that
I even know
stuff.
when you get it. You get it right after the podcast.
Right after this show, I go and get it. So take a commercial egg. Sometimes I have to stop and get some commercially because I'm out. Crack it. It's this pale yellow egg.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with it. It's fine.
Mhm.
And then the one that I'm getting from the farm is this absurd orange red. It's intense. They taste different. If you're just, the eye test says there's something different between these eggs for sure.
It's very obvious.
Yes. Yeah. And so that's big, when you understand that. A chicken nowadays, because it used to be a chicken, is a much smaller creature back in the old days. Now these big, gigantic, plumped up chickens, you see, they're obviously they want the biggest chicken for they can sell all that. So again, they're everything's a little different. I'm not complaining and not whining and saying all this stuff. I'm just simply saying things are different. The way we grow food is different, and how our body responds to it obviously is going to be affected by that too. So there's many factors here.
There are many factors, and I think there's a lot of pieces to the overall topic of success and failure and how we decide to look at stuff. Because I think you were kind of pointing to there, we can look at any of those food situations as either successes or failures.
Sure.
Depending on your viewpoint, right? We can look at it from the holistic organic viewpoint and say, oh, well, the commercial stuff, that's a failure. Or we can look at it from the commercial viewpoint and say, oh, wow, it's a tremendous success. It's the same thing. It's just two completely different ways of looking at it.
I know farmers that say, look, we have we have to feed a lot of people. I mean, there's people that need food, and I'm not saying it's great. It's just, to mass produce food, you have to mass produce it for the masses. You have to do it. It's not everyone, and I've heard this criticism of me. Not everyone can go to the private farm and buy 5 dozen eggs and and all that. I acknowledge that. I'm not saying that's, I understand that not everybody has that option to them. There's people that are, where I live, I think I've mentioned this multiple times. I have, in any direction, there's a grocery store within 2 miles of my house. We have an abundance we have no food insecurity in my area.
Yeah.
There's food everywhere. There's grocery. There's parts of the Richmond area where I live that have food scarcity. They don't have options. A lot of the grocery stores aren't there, so a lot of people find their nutrients at Dollar General or whatever, just nothing but processed food. So again, there's a lot of factors, and so I'm not in any way being arrogant or trying to be above, but it's all about, when you're looking at how things operate now, there's a lot of factors involved, and you're saying commercial farmers will say, we are wildly successful at feeding the masses, and they're not wrong. They're feeding the masses. The organic farmers are going, well, they're feeding them, but they're not feeding them the high quality stuff. When you look at the various diseases, when medical books were written in the United States, true story, it might have been in France, doesn't matter. Heart disease was left out.
Oh, wow, really?
Heart disease, they talked about it. They said the instances of heart disease are minor. We're much more concerned about these other things. So they left it out. and when the way we do food change, the way we do a lot of things change, heart disease is right up there. If it's not number one, it's number one or two or three somewhere.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's everywhere. So it's just our diet affects things, and so again, feeding the masses, it depends on your point of view. Is it success? Yeah, on some level. Is it a failure because of the lack of nutrient value? Possibly. But again, everything is what it is, and perspective based for that. And you're going to have to determine. Life is going to be about determining how you view something, what you feel about it.
If we're going to change the way we think about the failure piece, because that's originally what we were talking about.
Sure.
For me, that creates a level of excitement.
Yes.
The reason I say that is, yes, the way you're describing the way food is commercially produced today is accurate. But from what I'm also hearing, there are now I won't say in development because it hasn't really reached the commercial farmer yet. The commercial farming community is kind of resistant to this, but there are small tests that are being done by individuals where they are able to demonstrate that they can increase food yields in ways that are different from the way the commercial farmers have been doing it, just by combining growing stuff together and so forth, and in so doing, essentially reneutralizing, putting more nutrients into the soil that are being otherwise depleted. And as a result, the yields are getting ridiculous through these experimental methods. Now, we're quite a ways away from those actually hitting the commercial market. The commercial markets are resistant to that because they've figured out how they're going to do it, and they want to stick with that. But eventually, it's going to shift around. Eventually, those new techniques are going to become more and more commonplace. And to me, that's exciting because that's an example of having a, quote, failure, in this case, a failure of nutrient production, leading to a success because somebody tried a new way of doing something. And in so doing, they came up with something that it may not have caught on yet, but it will eventually. I mean, if commercial producers can get to the point where they realize that they're actually going to make as much or more money doing it the new way as they were the old way and be able to put out as much product as they did the old way, eventually it's going to reach the point where they're going to say, yeah, let's give it a shot.
Yes.
It's just a question of how long it takes to get there.
Yeah. One of the disruptors in the industry, if I eat fast food, which I do occasionally, it's like Chipotle is fast food to me. And that their market, they wanted no hormones in the chicken or steak. They locally, they source a lot of their food locally. And a lot of farmers don't like that because they only buy from farmers that meet their criteria of what their definition is, and they're a gigantic company now that are one of the most loved companies in America, and it's sort of the farmers don't like it because they dictate the environment. We're not buying from you because you don't do it this way, and that's pretty and that you can see the market be influenced by that too.
We didn't really have much time to address this piece of it, although we have touched on it in a variety of ways over the years. This point of resistance. You just mentioned how in this case it's farmers being resistant. Resistance is something that plays a very key role in the whole failure cycle.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, completely. That's a whole topic unto itself. Resistance.
It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's certainly a key component. And sort of circling back to where we were at, which I love the topic. No matter what you're doing in your life, I believe your perspective dictates your reality, and also your perspective dictates your understanding of various things. And when you view the world from a perspective of growth, I wake up every morning believing that this is a journey that I'm on. There is no destination. I'm not heading anywhere. I am on this journey. The life is the journey. It's the point. And the experience I have, the people I meet, the people who are in my orbit, I will often sit and just be amazed at the people that are closest to me how did we get close? What happened? How did these people randomly become such an important part of my life? It's just, I love that. Was it by mistake? I mean, we affect each other in a lot of ways. It's like just that one or two little things happen to sort of put us together, and it's like you're like, wow, I'm fascinated by who shows up, who stays, who leaves, the all of that is so waking up every day with sort of that wide-eyed, I can't wait to see what happens. And there will be failure, there'll be success, there'll be failure, there'll be growth. But no matter what, all of this is supposed to be happening, and that's life, going through it on a daily basis.
I love it. I'm thinking maybe we should carry on the topic next week and bring the resilience piece in, because like you said, that is another show. Why don't we make that another show?
Let's do that.
We'll do that next week.
As much as I love failure topic, I'm in love with the resilient topic.
All right. So we combine the two together. I think we have a winner.
We do. That's fantastic.
Good stuff. Well, head off and buy those eggs, because that's what you do this time of week. Appreciate you so much. We'll see you next week. Thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.